Hi guys, welcome back to Crafty Quilting Designs. Thank you for joining me for part 2 in my making of my Easter table runner. I hope you got your project started, so let's get right into it. Alright guys, so what I have done is did a little bit of a practice stitch for my satin and just making a decision as to if I wanted really sort of a pile-on fixed satin or slightly spaced out zigzag stitch. So I always do a practice so I can decide what I wanted, and I'm thinking that I'm happy with this particular one. So I'll show you how it started off, and then you could have at least decide on how you want yours to be. So hopefully you can see it a lot more clearly there. So at the top I started off really sort of piling on thick there, and then I adjusted my stitch width as well as my stitch length, and I think I am happy with this one at the bottom there, so that's what I'm going to go with. Alright, so always do a sample piece just so that you get your machine set and to make sure that your bobbin tensions, everything is working in harmony. Even if I'm going to do quilting, I always do a test first just to make sure I know exactly how things are going to work out for me. So we're going to do now this one, and I have added another tulip, and I've fussy cut slightly the other tulips. Obviously I showed you this one as what I was going to work with, and I've cut this one out from another fat quarter. So I'm going to use a very similar color for the thread and a slightly goldish color at the bottom for the bobbin at the bottom. Now when I do my satin stitches, what I tend to do is put the circular area of the press of foot, and hopefully you can pick this up in the camera there. So that circular area there where the needle is going to go from side to side like that, and I always make sure that it sits on half of the background fabric and half of the applique, so I can get it going on both sides as I do my stitching. Okay, for my butterick that I'm using, I have it on stitch number 7, and that is a zigzag, but as I said, you have to adjust it. So my stitch length is 0.4 and my stitch width is 3.0, so then you can adjust yours to see fit, and obviously, as I said, try it out on a piece of fabric so you know what you're getting into. So this is what we're going to do now. So I'm going to continue and sew all of it round all of the edges, and just to make sure it's on securely and nice and neatly. Once I've done that, I will show you exactly what they look like finished with the squares, and then we will take it to the next stage. So I'm going to start now, and I'm just going to let the feed dogs move the fabric. I'm not going to twist it until it's absolutely necessary. And just take your time and sew. Remember, what you're aiming for is to have the stitches, the zigzag stitches, go half on the background fabric and half on the applique. And I'm not going fast, I'm just keeping at a nice steady pace, just so that I have that rhythm there and I don't go off of it. And where there's a curve, I will then obviously curve it very slightly and smoothly so that I can get it nice and sharp. If you need to slow down while you curve, by all means do that. And you can hear the needle going through all of the fibers there quite easily. And once you build your confidence, by all means, speed it up. Now when you get to a point where you actually literally need to turn, I would say stop, don't move, make sure your needle is down, and then you pivot. Okay, so you position yourself into the angle that you want to move to. So obviously you can see that there's a curve. I know you can't see the other side, but I'm at this point where I'm curving. So you need to make sure that once you are at that point that you can curve. So position the needle so that it curves nice and easily for you, and you get that nice sharp peak at the point of turning the fabric. And again, you just continue to move that fabric slowly, take your time, and do it nice and neatly. Now, it's important that these stitches are added on nice and neat, because obviously this is a finished part of it, yeah? This is a completion of the application to put that applique on. So this must be done properly. So just take your time until it gets there. Of course, if you feel confident, then you can speed it up. And I like this method of applique. I literally love the, the point of using the satin stitch on top of it to finish it off. I just think it's lovely. I love that application process. There are lots of different methods of applique, but this is my favorite. And of course, if whatever method you like, you can are more than welcome to do that as well. And of course, there's the reverse one, but I just love this one. I love the finishing of the satin stitch on top of it. And obviously, as I told you before, I have matched my thread color, and I'm going to do that for all the rest of them, because obviously they have different colors for the applique, and I'm going to match it. But very likely I will keep the bobbin at the same color, but for the top thread I will definitely match. Again, just take your time and completely. So there's now, what has happened here is that I remember I've got 2 of this on here, so I'm going to just continue and go on to the other one. So it's a bit like quilting in a different sense that I have lines to follow, or guidelines to follow, to enable me to go to the area that I want to. So that's what I'm going to do here. So again, start my needle down, pivot, and then continue. This is a very quick project, and I'm sure you will enjoy doing it. And I'm not pulling or pushing it in any way. I'm just letting the feed dogs do its job. I'm being very patient with it. And if you're nearly coming up close to the end, you can slow down, get that machine needle down, and again pivot. And continue again. So I'm going to continue with this. And then I will show you how this one actually looks. Now I'm coming back up to a particular area where the 2 flowers meet, so I just want to show you what I've done so far. I'm just going to seal those stitches in there, raise it all up. I'm going to snip that right to close to it. Okay, so that is what it looks like so far. So hopefully you can see that a lot more clearly there. So this is the area we started up there, and I work all the way down and come across here also. So I'm going to go continue this, and then we will continue with the next stages. All right, so I have completed all of the appliques onto the 10-inch square, and this one is with the cracked egg, and I've just added a little bit of yolk just dribbling down there. Now what we need to do is to frame this. So I've gone ahead and started a few already, and so I'll just give you an idea what's actually happening. Now what I have done is cut 10-inch strips 4 times out of each different cut of the fabric. So if you could remember, I had the tulip and I had 2 eggs and the bunny, and so with each of that applique fabric I have cut 4 10-inch strips for the squares. And so what I'm actually doing is mixing them together, and I'll explain to you what I mean by that further. So we also need some cornerstones, and this is just a 2-inch square as well. All right, and we're going to sew this front sides together. Now I am using solid, and I think solid is good for this because I think there's already a lot of prints already in the project. So I think the solids for the cornerstone is ideal. So you sew that front sides together using your seam allowance, and it should look like this. Now this is the first one I have sewed on here. So the cornerstones are going to go on to 2 of the length. So for example, once you've sewn it on, it's going to look like that. So you're going to sew your first 2 strips on here, top to bottom or side to side, and then once you've done that, you will need to press it. Now I haven't pressed the squares yet. I am just going to finger press it. Okay, it's not cut under bias or anything, so it's not going to stretch. And now with this particular one, you need to be be reminded that because it's 2 light fabric, you then need to decide which edge you're going to actually press the seam allowance to. So I've just gone towards the actual 2-inch that I've stitched on there. All right, and I've done that for both sides. Now after you've added your front sides together for your solid and your strip here, then you're going to lay them down, matching up your seams, and then pin and sew. Okay, so I'm just making sure my seams are nesting together before I actually sew it down, because that's important. We want those cornerstones to match up really nice and neatly. Right, and then I will just make sure this is nice and flat, and then I will stitch this on, and I'll do the same for the other side. So again, once I have done that, put them all sides together, then I will add it to here. So I'll show you what that looks like, because I've done one already. So as you can see, I have used a different color here. Again, this fabric here, this print is what I used for the bunny. So again, I will repeat myself. I cut the strips, 4 strips, 2 by 10 to ensure that I can go all the way around, and then added on my cornerstones. So do that for all of your squares, and again, you need to mix them up. Don't use the same print. Now for the bunny, and this is, I use the print here for the egg as well, and of course this is the bunny fabric I use. I've also added a little bit of flowers here with a little bit of an owl, and I actually just did a little bit of fussy cutting for this particular one there, so I'll bring it closer to the screen so you can have a look. All right, now for this particular one here, we need a needle and thread, and we need some buttons. Now I've pre-selected a little bit. I'm going to put it on the white so you can actually pick it up hopefully, and see what matches up very nicely. So we also need this for the eye, so you know that's the main purpose for choosing that. So you need to decide which one you're going to put on there. Obviously, bunnies tend to have really bright color eyes, so you can use a pink, and then you will obviously put it down in the most appropriate space or spot for that bunny. So you can use a pink that sort of blends out, or you can use white, or you can go similar color so it kind of goes into it and it doesn't stand out, or you can go something completely different. Now I quite like this one. It's moving. I quite like that one, but I haven't decided this yet. Another thing you also need is some pom-poms for the bushy tail. So I have some pom-poms here. I didn't make these. I can make pom-poms, but I just think just to make one pom-pom, I could save myself some time, and just I was in my craft store and I saw these and I thought this will be very ideal for it. So it's a little bit big, and then there is this little one here, which I think is a little bit more better. The sizes, I think, just fits in there into the tail area nicely. And again, you would need to sew the pom-pom on as well as the eyes, and I will do that at this particular stage, because once we've done all of the squares, we will then start to do the borders. We'll need to do a sashing in the middle and then the border all the way around. Now I haven't decided, because I usually decide on my borders once the squares have been completed, and I can put the squares together and sort of, you know, interview the border fabric, so to speak, so that I'm sure of what I'm actually choosing. So I'm going to go with the smaller one, as I said, and I may go with the pink button for the eyes. I'll put those aside. Now, one thing that let me just mention is that once you've actually added all of these on, you will need to cut this or trim this down to a 13-inch square. And that's what we're looking for each of your block, a 13-inch square. All right, so that is the most important thing. So make sure it all measures down nice and neat. Okay, so we've got 2 more to do. And once we've done those, then we will move on. Now, this particular fabric here is what I'm going to use for this one, for the border. So I've already measured this out in the sense that I know I can get 4 from this. So that's 2, 4, 6, 8. So that's 8 by 10. And I'm going to cut these into my 2 strips. And I'm using the board for this purpose. So I'm just going to line it up at the edge to edge, and you can tease it so that it really goes into that corner there. And it's nice and straight. And you measure your 2. There, because remember, every square is an inch, and then you cut. All right, so this is just 1 down, and I need leverage here to be standing to cut this properly. Okay, and then the other 2, and again, make sure that your fabric is lined up properly, and again do your cut. And I'm going to make sure I did a lot more pressure this time and not light, so I get a nice clean cut. That's better. So you need 4 of these, and notice I'm not moving my fabric, I am just moving the ruler. That's all I am moving, because once you cut it, it's already set. It's already set, so to get that other cut really nice and clean. Now I've got a little bit peeking out here, and I'm going to trim that down so it is lovely and straight. So, and that's important because you don't want anything to be off and to over cut, because remember, you need to square it down. So make sure your strips are correct, and then that way you don't have to overcut and go beyond what you need to do for the cut. All right, so get rid of that. So again, I am going to sew this front sides together, there, front sides together, there. Then I'm going to take my other square here and do these front sides together. And this is my 2-inch square here, 2 by 2, and then I will have the other bits for that, the other measurements for that. So that's what we're going to do now, and then we will move on to doing the sashing and the borders. So all of the borders are around the squares. I've completed all of them, and now the next stage is to add the sashing. And so I'm going to go with a grey sashing to separate them. All right, so I've already lined up how I want my borders, sorry, my blocks to flow. So let's bring this down here. I've just cut a 2 strip here, and of course I'm going to lay front sides together and trim it down and then add on this piece to it and then do the same. So in essence I'm going to need 3 strips of 2-inch. So obviously be going again to that. So now our length has changed, so it's going to be 13. So it's no longer 10, so it's going to be 13, because remember it's a 13-inch square, right? So you can cut exact 13 here, so then you can just sew and flip it over, but I'm just going to trim as I go. And again, I'm using fat quarters for this, so this was again from my fat quarter. So that's where we're at. So I'm going to go do all of that. So remember, it's front sides together, and with normal, with solids, you don't necessarily have a wrong side and a right side. So just pin so that it stays in place. And I have ironed out all of my blocks already, so they're nice and flat and all squared up to 13-inch square. So again, going to stitch along here, and just so that as I remember, but talking about stitch, I have not used a 1/4 inch. I just use less than, so less than a 1/4 inch I've used to stitch my squares together. And one of the reasons for that is just to make sure that I didn't lose the end around there for my eggs, so I had enough room there and not to put it in the seam allowance. So hence the reason why I didn't use half an inch seam. I used less than, or half of a half an inch seam, if that makes sense. All right, so that's what I'm going to do now, and then we will take it from there. And then our next stage is to add a border around it. As I said, I'm not sure if I'm going to add 1 or 2, but before I do that, I will put my buttons on and my pom-pom on for my bunny. Okay, so I have completed sewing all of the squares together, and as you can see, I've used a sashing of grey here, and again it's a solid, and again it's a fat quarter. Now the next step is to add on the border, and I'm going to stay with this grey theme. So far I have used 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fat quarters to make this project. And once you've sewn all of your squares together using your sashing, you would need to measure the quilt top, all right, in order to do the first border. Now I usually do 2 borders, but I will see what it looks like once I've completed added on the first border, because remember I said I introduce, or I audition the borders. So I've got my first grey one to add on, and I measured the whole quilt, and it measures 134 in total. So I measured the length as well as the width, and that gives me a total of 134. Okay, meaning that I need 134 in length of strips to go all the way around. Okay, so I needed to drill that down a little bit more and find out exactly how much strips I actually need. So in this case, after trimming off my sashing here, I then measured the width of my leftover fat quarter, and that measured 18 in length, and so therefore I divided that 18 by 134, which gave me 7.44 in strips, so meaning I need 7.5 strips altogether to make up the 134 to go all the way around the quilt top. So that's what I'm going to do now. So if I decide to put on another border, then I will then measure the quilt top again and then do the same calculations to get how much strips of fabric I need in order to finish up the border. So I'm going to start at the top, work my way all the way down, and then trim, and then continue again. Now it should be okay to just put it on the edge there, or if you want you can probably start at the, it doesn't really matter whether you start lengthways and go all the way down, or if you start widthways, it doesn't really matter. It works out the same because you've already done the calculations. But because of I'm going to do what I usually do, I'm going to start at the top, sew, cut, and then continue all the way around. If you wanted to, you can just lay the quilt top down and trim it up and then work your way around that way. But I am just going to sew on, cut, and then move on very quickly. So that's what I'm going to do, and then we will see if we wanted to, if I'm deciding whether or not to just stop there and go on with sandwiching the quilt. So so that's where we're at now, and we will take it from there and move on to the next stage. All right, so the top is finally ready for the table runner, and I didn't go ahead with the borders. Let's actually show you what I did. So I stayed with the grey border, and I thought I would just go along and baste it as it is. I did use some spray basting, and I sandwiched it together, so obviously, and then I pinned it as well just to give a little bit extra security. For the bunny, what you just need to be mindful of when you are doing your quilting is just to be careful around there and there with your needle so that it doesn't get jammed there and broken. But that's where we're at now. I will do a piece binding just to wrap it all up, and then that will be the end of the quilt, so I'll see you at that stage. Okay guys, so the table runner is finally completed, but before I actually show you the completion, I had some fabric left over, because remember we used 5 charm squares to make our table runner. So rather than just put it in your stash for a later day to use up those pieces left over, I thought we can do something with it. So I thought we could make some 5-inch, no, and these 6-inch actually, 6-inch squares coasters. All right, now I've already completed 2, so I've put the binding on them as well, and the same backing for the top, the table runner. So it's literally sort of a matching set you'll be making. I am making 6 to go with the table runner because it worked out to be nice and long for a 6-runner table, or obviously if you wanted to hang over the sides of the table, i.e. lengthways, if you have a 4 table, it will be ideal. Nevertheless, I'll show you what I've done with these. So I have my backing fabric cut to the same size. Yeah, so it's just like making a quilt really. All right, and of course my middle piece, so your wadding, as well as my front piece here. So I've cut them all to the same size, and of course I'm making my sandwich, so I'm just putting it together like this one here. All right, so it's all put together. What I would say is to use some pins just to secure them. So if you add some pins to it, and it will just keep it in place while you sew, so it wouldn't move. So just do about, I don't know, 4, 1 on each side. You don't need that much really. It will just keep it securely there while you actually sew. So that's what I'm referring to. All right, now all I did to quilt it, I just added some zigzag stitches. Hopefully you can see that there. And then once I did that, so this one obviously I had to piece it just to make up the square, because obviously I ran out of this one, so I added on there, and you can do that. So mix and match it, piece it together, even better. All right, and as I said, I zigzagged it, and I just did squares, nothing special. And once I did that, once I stitched it, I just put it back onto that 6-inch square ruler, and I size it down, i.e. I trimmed it up so to make sure it's nice and even. And then what I did next was use all of the leftover bits, and I created my binding. So I had, obviously for the binding, it's 2.5 inches, and whatever length was left, I just cut it and just stitched it together to make my binding. So you can see it's very much all the colors left over. So that's what you can do. So what I'm going to show you now is how to actually put the binding on something as simple as small as this. And again, it's the same method for if you're going to sandwich a quilt together. So it's literally the same thing you're doing. I didn't use any spray basting glue or anything, or pins, as I said, other than these wonder clips that I actually used just to hold it together while I was stitching it, so it doesn't move. You know, the same thing applies as to if you're moving it with, you know, the sandwich, and it needs to be in place, so you have to clip it down. And again, didn't use any pins. So yeah, so that's literally what I did, and they look quite beautiful. I quite like this one here. Of course, once I've done all of them, as I said, I'm doing 6, so you can do how much you want for your particular table. So I don't really use the things I make. I usually sell them on my eBay shop, so you're more than welcome to visit that at some point. And the link is in the description below, so there you go. Right, so I'm going to show you how to do the binding, and then you can continue to make all of yours. And yeah, see you in a minute. All right, so I wouldn't zigzag it in front of you, because obviously I think everybody knows how to use the machine for zigzagging. But as I said, let's work on putting on the binder. So I'm going to start with a tail end. What I mean by that is I'm not going to start right at the top, so I'm going to give the binding itself a little bit of a tail end so I can rejoin it once I go all the way around. So I'm going to start probably around there, so probably about 2 inches down. And I'm lining up the edge of my raw edge there with all of the fabric to the edge of the actual presser foot, okay? I'm just going to check my settings. Right, so keep everything nice and neat at the end. Now the trick for actually doing that mitered corner, and I'm going to do it on the machine rather than take it off and show you, is to get your needle right to the end there. I'm going to try and not use my hand so I don't get it in the way. I'm going to get the point of my needle, or the tip of my needle, probably about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of the fabric there, the edge of that sandwich. So I'm going to put it back. Okay, even if you've got to walk it, yeah, what I mean by that, by walking it, is turning the wheel manually. Lift it up, leave the needle down, and all I'm going to do is just lift this up there. Look at me, I'm lifting it up. Okay, now good example, if you see a little bit of a curl up like that, that's telling me that it is not quite to the end just as yet. I'm going to put it back in position. I'm going to walk it slightly and put my presser foot back down. Give it one more walk just to make sure it's at the end. I'm going to do the same. I'm going to leave it up and just flip it up. That's literally it. And you get that simple mitered corner there. And you need to make sure that it's level to the top up there. So you need to make sure this mitered corner, so it gives it to you automatically from when you lift it up underneath the presser foot there. Okay, so make sure it's lifted up and you adjust it so that it meets the edge of the original area you just left. You put your presser foot back down, readjust it, straighten it, and you just continue. Now I'm not stretching I am just making sure it's nice and taut so that it doesn't get, you know, sort of wobbly. And if you notice, nothing has moved there. Everything is still lined up at the end. Okay, make sure your needle is down. Lift it up. Do the same thing. See, already it's giving you that mitered corner there, quite easily, simplistically, so you don't have to do anything, right? And then you put it back down, and then you just continue. Sometimes, as I said, just walk it if you know you don't want to come all the way off. Same thing again applies. Lift it up, you get that 90 degree there, you lay it down flat and line everything up again, put your presser foot down and continue. And I'm just checking that I'm almost at the end. Same applies, lift it up again, or automatically gives you that. You press it down, put the needle down. Now I'm going to just sew a little bit, because remember I've got that reattachment there that I need to attach both of them to get it nice and flat. So I'm just going to finish off that corner. I'm going to come in a little bit there. All right, let me just lock those stitches in, take it out. Now you need to take it out for this particular one. I'm just going to clip it and make sure I have enough tail for my thread, because I have a habit of always not doing myself enough. Now have a look at it. As you can see now, it's nicely lined up there. All of your corners are there. Now if you need to just clip these off, that's what I usually do, just clip them off there so that I can get a nice turn when I fold my binding over. Right, okay, so now to put this together, now what you need to do is simply look and see where the edges meet. All right, now you need to give yourself a little bit of a where the edges meet there. So I think I took that out of the camera shot, so I can see there that my edges are going to meet somewhere there. However, I can't cut it there because I need to give myself some room in order to stitch it together. So I would need to literally cut around there, because I need to give myself an edge to fold over, yeah, to create a hem for it. So I'm going to lay it down, and I can see the original one stops there, and I'm going to mark it so that I know where I'm cutting and where I'm going to be folding it as well, because I need to obviously bind them together. So I'm going to give myself a mark on both of them so I know where I want to join it. So I'm just going to go for like a 1/4 inch there, and that one there. So hopefully you can see this. I'm going to put, so I've marked it there and I've marked it there. So I'm going to cut. So get rid of that. Now this is where the sort of a tricky part comes in. And when I say tricky, it's more fiddly than anything else. So we need to then lay these two bits together. So right sides touching together, like so. Hopefully you can see that. So right sides, you can see where the mark is. Right sides touching together. You line them up and you stitch it. I'm trying not to take this out of camera shot so you can see what I'm doing. Now you may need to squeeze this in half so that you have enough leverage. So all I've done is folded my little pad there in half, so I have enough leverage to sew this together. Now you'll be doing this for a bigger quilt, so obviously you would leave yourself a little bit more room with a larger quilt or a larger work piece that you're working on. So again, put it together and you're just simply going to stitch it. Okay, so I'm going to fold that down again, and as I said, it is a little bit fiddly because it is not what the fabric wants to do. Yeah. So you just need to be a little bit fiddly. So obviously, as I said, when you do this for a quilt, you will have a little bit more room to play with. Now I didn't backstitch there because I don't see the purpose, because I am going to stitch this in properly into the binding. So hopefully you can see what I'm doing and my fingers are not in the way too much. Okay, so we just trim up all of these threads. And this is where you just test it out and see if it's actually the right length. So now I've put it together there. All right. So what I'm going to do now is just continue. So I'm going to stretch it out so it goes in line. It obviously will get a little bit crimpled because you've kind of squashed it together. So I've just put that seam in there so that I can then continue to stitch, and I'm just readjusting to where I actually stop, and I am going to back tack there just to make sure, and then all I'm going to do is continue because I've lined up all of my edges. Get my hands out of the way. I've lined up all of the edges there again, and to continue doing that. So, and if it's a little bit, just use a tool and smoothen it out. Right, and all that's left to do now is to simply fold it over. Let me just zoom out a little bit so you can see. There you go. Now, all you need to do now is just fold it over, and you have all of your points there. Make sure you poke it through. And the same thing applies. Now, to do the next bit, you're going to fold your binding on the previous line you just stitched all the way around with when you put the binding on first of all. So I'm going to start in the middle again. So just literally on that edge. I know you can't see the thread too much, so literally on that previous stitch in there, put the binding over it. Now you can do this on the other side. Actually the front side is up to you, but it's easier if it's on the wrong side or the back side of it. As long as you stay on the previous stitch, so it's like you stitch in the ditch and you continue all the way around. When you get to the end, you just need to fold again. So hope you can see your mitered corner there. You hold that down. Alright, and then the same applies. Make sure you're on the previous line. Don't go beyond it, because if you go beyond it, what's going to happen, you're going to miss. I just want to show you what the stitches looks like. Let me just clean that up. Okay, if you go beyond the previous stitching line on the back, so remember we stitched literally on the ditch that was there before, and if you go beyond, then you're going to miss it and go on the actual top of your project. So you need to keep it on that line so that you get that original stitching line there. So I'm going to continue this all the way around, and then I'll show you all of the projects together. Okay, so I have finally completed the table runner. Let's have a look at it and see what we actually did together. So as you can see, remembered we used 5 fat quarters to actually make the whole project. It's for a large table. I would say this will fit a dinner table that seats 6 quite easily. and we used a 5 quarters, sorry. So it was the grey, this particular color here, that one there that we actually use, as well as the one for the rabbit. It worked out really quickly and it came out beautifully. I am extremely pleased with it. I also did a piece binding with all of the leftover of the actual tabletop. So I hope yours went really well and worked out easily for you. Now, while you're looking at it, you can actually see all of the quilting patterns I did. I did a meandering shape. And with what was left over, I actually went ahead and made some coasters with it. So I was able to piece some of them together, use it as well as for binding, and use it all up. So literally all of the 5 fat quarters was used up on this particular project. So you got 2 items from the 5 fat quarters, and I think that's a real good way of using up the fabric effectively. So I hope you will have that sort of leftover as well for your particular project. Now I went ahead also and made another one from I don't want to say scrap, but fabric that I had from my stash, and again it worked out really beautifully as well. I used purple and yellow on this one, and some blue for my sash, and very similar theme in theory really. Particular one here, I just used one of the tulip flower with a stem and flower there as well. So I kept it quite simple. This one is for a smaller table. I would say you can use it as for a table of 4 or as a wall hanging. So again, you don't have to use fat quarters for this project. If you needed to use from your stash, I would say definitely go ahead, as long as you've got the fabric there to do it. Now this comes to the end of our 2-week Easter table project. So I hope you had a really fantastic time making it. You've learned some new skills on how to use applique and interfacing and make cornerstones, etc. So if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, share, hit that bell so that you know when another one is uploaded. Have a good day and take care. Bye-bye.